So I'm with MUFS, I'm a journalist, and recently we went around campus asking college students college questions, and we just kind of wanted to get a teacher's perspective on the questions we asked, while also keeping the questions a little bit new for you. So without further ado, I just want to get this opening statement out that we are an uncensored channel, so feel free to express your emotions through harsh language. We don't judge here. But anyways, let's get this first question out of the way. So, I'm assuming you were a college student at one point in time, correct?
All right, cool. Several times.
Several times. So, where were you a college student at?
I started my college career in 1997 at a place called Metropolitan State of Denver, which was a commuter campus. I failed out of there. I ended up going to University of Northern Colorado, went there for 3 years, failed out of there. And then in 2008, when the stock market crashed, I was laid off from my job, so I had to go back to school. And I ended up finishing at the University of Northern Colorado, my undergrad, in, 2010.
To get further insights into Mr. McCormick's living situation, I did research into the 2008 stock market crash. In researching, I found shocking similarities between the economy then to our economy now. On the screen, there's going to be some information that you can read that further supports my claim and also gives a little bit more insight into the economy now and also then. Read it or don't. I really don't care. We got to get back to the interview.
I went to New York and I went to a place called the New School for creative writing, and then I went to Hunter College for MA in monsters. I studied monsters and monster fiction, and I'm currently finishing up my PhD at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
Wow.
So
you've been all over the place in terms of college. So out of all of the colleges that you've been to, which one was your favorite and which one was your worst?
I don't know. Each part has its own thing, right? Like, I think I found who I was and what I wanted to do the most at the New School when I went for my master's degree. Undergrad had been really hard for me, as shown by all the times I dropped out. It had been really challenging just because I didn't really understand myself or the way that I functioned well in school. And it wasn't until I was in New York and like living far away from my family and like figuring out what life looked like when I was just completely myself, that college really clicked. And so I really think of that as an important moment. But for me, mostly, it's about, like, I had some really good teachers along the way, and, like, those relationships were really important. And I made a really good bunch of peer group friends, and that was really important. And that can happen anywhere you are.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Do you still stay connected with these teachers and these peer groups?
Yeah, I hear from some of my former teachers every now and then. We talk back and forth, especially the writers that help me out. And then, a lot of my peers from my PhD, we talk on the phone almost every month. I'm meeting with one of them to help prepare her for an interview this weekend. Like, we really look out for each other.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
So I heard you talking about like your college experience and how you dropped out. Would you like to dive deeper into that?
Sure. I have some learning disabilities. And so those learning disabilities kind of weren't really addressed when I was going to school. It was sort of a new field, and we hadn't really thought about it, and we hadn't really thought about how different minds and how different brains sort of, function, if you need a pen, how different brains sort of function in different environments. And so I was having a hard time with the disability. I was having a hard time. I was a poor college student, so I was working 2 jobs most of my undergrad. And it's just hard to hold the ship together, especially when you don't know what resources are available to you at the school.
Could not have said that better myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I also have like learning disabilities, and so when you grow up and it's everybody saying that you have a disability, you're kind of like, no, I don't. I can do this myself. But then you realize that there's tools that can be used, and they should be used for a reason. So you say you have a learning disability, correct? Yeah. Would you like to say specifically which one that is?
Sure. So I have ADHD, and I also have I'm autistic.
Okay.
Yeah, I only figured out the autism thing about 5 years ago, and that was through interaction with somebody else who had been recently diagnosed, and I started to understand, like, even though I don't have, like, some strong presentations, like, the way I see the world and the way that I'm able to maintain energy as I move through the world is different from a lot of folks. And so, so those are my primary disabilities. But I also have, like, celiac disease and, like, other things, asthma, things that also can, like,
that's more like
throw off your life.
Yeah, you said.
But they can throw off your life, right? Like, if I eat something that I shouldn't be eating, like, that takes me out of school for a week, right? And all of these things, what I'm saying is like understanding yourself and understanding the way you move through the world. It can be a big part of, like, finding success or finding the bandwidth to move through the different things that you have to do in life. And all of it matters. All of it counts. So... anyway.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful answer. So back to the learning disabilities, how did that, like, throw a wrench in your college experience? Because you said that you dropped out a couple of times, and I'm assuming it's because of the learning disabilities, right?
Well, it was the live situation again. I was so broke that I was working 2 jobs and I was homeless for a little while during my undergrad.
And when you were homeless, this was where?
This was when I was at the University of Northern Colorado.
Okay. So homeless in Colorado.
Yeah.
How was
the
that?
first time? I mean, terrible. Like, it wasn't great. I didn't even realize till years later that meant I was homeless, because what it was is I just couldn't find housing in my price range. And so I was sleeping on the couches of friends.
So you were couch hopping?
For several months.
Okay.
But that's homelessness, right? I didn't even put it together. But then, like, when you put all that together and you think about the sort of constellation of factors in your life, suddenly school starts to feel less and less important, right? It's hard to prioritize these things in that system. And like I say, this was back in the early 2000s, and support structures just weren't what they were, what they are now. There wasn't a food pantry, there wasn't a housing help, there wasn't a number of resources that exist like here at USM. They just didn't exist back then. You were sort of on your own. Even disability support was very marginal. Like, I was taking a bunch of writing courses and I was given a time and a half, right? I'm sure you've heard of the accommodation. You get time and a half.
You get
on
extra
time. But when you're writing essays that don't happen in class, time and a half doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything for you. And I never got to, like, engage in conversations or try to seek other ways through. And I also was surrounded by a lot of faculty who expected us to bootstrap our way up, right? And to, like, pull ourselves up. And I think the mentality for a lot of faculty has changed at this point. I think we are more supportive and more understanding, I think, trying to figure out a way to help students, navigate being supported. And I think that makes a huge difference in the world. I didn't have that when I was going through school. And so, yeah. So I crashed and burned a couple of times.
We got to break a couple legs and make an omelet. You know what they say?
I wouldn't say that.
Well, you're saying how you could have wished you could have had, like, these types of helping hands back then. So I'm going to ask you if you could go back and provide your younger self with, let's say, like, these tools to help with learning disabilities, what would you give him and why?
I think the main thing, I actually am glad that I moved through the world the way I did, because the way I discovered who I wanted to be as a teacher and like the way I wanted to connect with students couldn't have been done any other way. If I had been successful throughout school, I wouldn't have known what it was to have a hard time in school, right? And I think that's important. I think when you only have faculty who only know success in the institution, then that limits the ways that they can understand students who are going through a hard time. And so if you have faculty who have had a hard time, who have had to struggle in various ways, it opens up doors, right, to connect with students. Every student of mine has their own experience and their own thing that they're going through. And I think it's really important to try and reach them where they're at, right? To like see them for who they are and support that as best you can. I mean, it's a hard world, but like if I didn't have the experience that I did, I wouldn't be where I am now. Now, that being said, I also look back and I think back then we could have done better with learning disability support, with different forms of support. And as I move forward now as a teacher, I oftentimes find myself thinking about, well, what can we do now? How's the way that we can change the way a classroom operates, or the way students think about themselves? Are we all in competition with each other? Or can this be something different? Can college be a different sort of learning experience for students to learn how to move through the world? And that's where I'm at now, is like I reflect on the hardships in order to make choices going forward, right? Just to, I don't know, make a meaningful change, do better.
That's I think I might quote you on that. I reflect on change to make the decisions. Staying on topic with like helping with learning disabilities, do you think there is such thing as over-helping? Because with my personal experience, I think sometimes so I had ADHD as well, and oftentimes I'd be in these like support classes, right?
Right.
But they would kind of treat you like you're dumb, you know? It's like I know it might be hard for me to focus sometimes, but I can still, do X, Y, and Z. So do you think there's such thing as like over-helping that makes students lazy, or is that like not true?
I think we're in another period of transition, right? I think we're in another shift in the way that we're thinking about disability, because, I mean, like I say, 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I was in college, there just wasn't much of anything. That sort of support didn't exist. You were told you weren't good enough to be in college, and that was the end of the conversation. I'd say within the last 5 or 10 years, there's been another shift where disability has traditionally been addressed from the outside looking in, right? From people who don't have disabilities, don't understand what it's like to move through the world that way, looking in and going, oh, this is what you need. And that's where you sort of get infantilized and made to, oh, like you're disabled, so you're dumb. And dumb's
very harsh word.
It's the wrong word. It's another word with ties to disability history and disability culture to make people feel less. I think we have more people like myself who are disabled, and we're looking at the world around us, and we're in a position where we can start to make changes, and we can start to say, okay, that version of disability didn't really help us, but here's a version that might, right? Here's a way that we can think about it instead of being an individual issue, because disability isn't an individual issue. Disability is a community issue, right? You think about what makes a sidewalk accessible, right? And those little curb cuts that exist on that. The original intention might be to help somebody with a wheelchair go up and down it, right? But it also serves a function to make it more accessible for people who can't make big steps up and down, who can't, or maybe who are on a skateboard, or like suddenly by providing access for one group, you find ways to
Support
make
other
the
groups.
world more accessible to everybody. And I think we can think about college that way. I think we can think about how we can reshape the community, reshape the ideals, the goals, so it makes the world more accessible to everybody. Knowledge is not a scarcity thing, right? Oftentimes we try to think about the value of our education based on scarcity, like how many people are going to get this grade, how many people are going to... but like, we all can learn things. We all can develop skills. We all can, choose to be involved in classes that move us or that shape us. There is no scarcity in that. There's no need to shrink what the experience can be for people.
So I heard you say that it's not really about the individual, it's about the community.
Yeah.
So I would actually disagree with you, but in a little bit, because I was put in the disability classes, right? Mm-hmm. And I would notice that I just am different from the people who are already being told that they're different. Mm-hmm. And so, because sometimes I really needed that individual time, which I'm sure you get in a community, of course, but also at the same time, I think my learning experience would have been dramatically different if I did get more individual help with my learning disabilities.
Right.
So what do you have to say about that?
What I would say is think about from a structural perspective, right?
Okay.
Instead of thinking about from your perspective, think about in terms of the way the classroom was designed. And the classroom, if it's designed to say everybody with a disability needs this, everybody shall be treated this way, everybody shall have this sort of, right, the things that were pressed on you, right? As opposed to if the classroom was designed saying, this student is different than this student is different than this student. We can meet this student this way, we can meet this student this way, we can meet this student this way. By shifting, that's what I mean by community, right? Is, yes, we are all individuals. We all have our own needs and abilities. In my class that I teach, one of the things that I offer is participation points. But participation isn't based on what you do for yourself. It's what you do for your community. And the idea is that no two people are going to want to do participation the same way, right? Some people aren't talkers. Some people are, they engage in different ways. And my idea is what if you could engage in a way that's honest for you, that's functional for you, that meets your strengths, your desires, but also does something for other people in the room? What if that was how we thought about participation? Is how do you make your classroom better for your classmates? And when you start thinking in that direction, suddenly what's possible in that classroom expands, right? Because it's not just me providing service for everybody. It's everybody looking out for everybody else. And I think there's real power in that. I think there's real momentum that can be had. But it's about thinking about it in terms of community rather than
the individual.
Right. Just like,
in order to help yourself, you kind of have to help the people around you.
Right. I guess the point is that the disability flaw is not the individual. The disability flaw is a society or a community that isn't built to meet that individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Right. Man, if I could go back and tell little me one thing about the whole school experience, I'll tell him what you just told me. That was great. That was beautiful. I could not have gotten a better answer out of you. As Mr. McCormick's interview progressed, we gradually switched perspectives from his to the students. We were discussing my street interviews with the students and decided to focus on one question. What would you change about college and why? When I asked the students this, the most common answer I got was the cost. And considering how he was a college student 7 times over, I would think he would have a lot to say about the cost of college. This is what he had to say.
So what I would say is it's reasonable that cost is a big factor for students, right? But again, I think the problem is when you think about it individually, why do I have to pay so much for this education? When you start digging a little bit, and it doesn't take a lot of digging, you start to realize that the reason you as an individual have to pay so much for college is because we've disinvested from education on the state level, on the city level, on the national level. Because there's less funding coming from major sort of public support, that increases the cost to the student, right? Each semester we're doing this, and I mean, it's happening at every college campus across the country. As local, state, and federal funding decreases, we have to, it impacts your education in two ways. First, it increases the cost. And if you look at the cost changes over the last 20 years, it's exponential, right? It does not match growth of income. It doesn't match growth of anything else. It becomes such an unbearable sort of increase, right? But that's because it's not funded through more formal sort of mechanisms. The other thing that happens is there are cuts. Lots of students, and I'm sad that this wouldn't come up, lots of students might not be aware that at campuses across the country, including this one, administration is looking at closing, cracking down, and shuttering programs left and right. Master's programs, doctoral programs at this very campus are being shut down.
And that's kind of killing the community, right?
Well, I mean, it's not only killing the community, it's killing the idea of what college should be. There's so much emphasis on the value of your education in terms of can you get a job off of this, that we're eliminating anything that we can't directly say, oh, this is a large job market. So the arts gets hit, humanities gets hit. And different requirements for students get lowered because the university is so afraid of their lack of funding that they are making preemptive moves to reduce their costs. But then the question becomes, what do you get out of it? What do you get out of that reduction? And the answer is less. You as a student get less every single time those cuts are made because this college becomes less, what's possible at this school becomes less. And I don't think students are really aware of the fact that these cuts are happening, and they're happening everywhere. This isn't a USM only problem, but it is happening here.
Okay, so then that's going to lead perfectly into my next question. What is a critique you have of the school?
I've only been here since August, and to be honest, I've gotten along with my colleagues really well. I get along with everybody. I've really enjoyed my students and being here with them. I think.
Do you enjoy Aiden? I know he must be a terrible student. Huh?
Aiden is one of my favorites, absolutely. Because, I mean, Aiden and I had a conversation in class about exploring possibility, right, of not being sure. And gosh, shouldn't college be about that, of like not being sure what you want to do and like getting to experience little bits of it until you figure out what you want to do?
100%.
Absolutely. But as we shrink the college, you have less options for that, right?
So it's kind of turning into more like high school, you know, where it's like you just have to take these classes instead of having the freedom of changing your major, you know?
Well, you certainly have less majors available to you, the way the cuts go. My main critique of this school, I think, is we live in a very strange time, and it's not specific to this school. It is every school. I think there's a real opportunity for students to become informed and become involved in what's going on around them. And I think everybody thinks that it's above their pay grade. It's above their level in the institution or what they should be doing as a college student. But man, if students don't start demanding that we do things certain ways, then what does it matter, right? What is your investment in this school? Is it just financial? Or is it more? Do you want to help decide what the vision of this community looks like? And I think most students, whether they're choosing to or they don't feel like the choice is available to them, opt out. And I think this is true across the country right now. I think folks are opting out because they think the issues are too big for them. And God, I wish they realized if they just started looking around, things could change, right? You could link up with somebody, start talking, start making requests and having conversations that matter, and decide what this place looks like.
Well, I will say through this project that we're working through MUFS, we hope that more people will voice their opinions and more people will start to look at us so that way changes can start happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because I agree with you. I think students have a really loud voice, and that if enough people demand of change, then change will happen. But you have to feel strongly enough about that change. And so that's just me kind of reinstating what you said. I agree 100%.
But you also have to be willing to have the small conversations, right? It's not the big, like, oh, we're going to go protest on Tuesday or whatever. Instead, it's like, I just want to have this conversation with my peers to show that we're both interested. And maybe we'll have a good idea between the two of us. Maybe the two of us will get together and film something that will be shown by somebody else and then, like, be passed around. Those little things make a huge difference if there are enough of them. You just have to decide that you are part of the conversation.
Of course. That's great. So I have this quote, right? And students in developmental classes like English 100E are bullshit because they are most likely to drop out due to the failed education system. Now, I don't know who said this quote, but I'm just wondering what you think about it.
It's possible that I said some version of it.
Allegedly, hypothetically.
Some version of it. I think I might be misquoted a little bit. What I was talking about is that courses like English 100E exist because, again, you think about it in terms of system. There are folks who can perform in a way that is expected for 101, English 101. And then there are folks who don't perform in the way that's expected. And I don't think that's an intelligence gap. I think it's just knowing what the rules and the expectations are and being able to perform those. There's been a lot of critique for the last 10 years about what developmental education like 100E does. I think it's an incredibly valuable tool. And I think it provides access to students who might otherwise get pushed out of college the same way I was. But I think, how do I put this?
No, I hate that when I'm like on the spot and I'm trying to think of the words to say and they just like won't come to mind.
I think it's bullshit that students are discriminated against based on performances in very small metrics such as the ACT score.
Amen.
I think that sucks. But I do think we have to also recognize that the system that we're in and that there are ways of moving through that system, right? And the only way that we open that up is by, again, figuring out how to get all those students who don't perform in the same way moving through the college, being able to stick through, being able to find success. And so in that way, I try to teach my 100E course in such a way to give students tools to be able to navigate every other step of the way. But I also want them to keep being authentic to who they are. I don't think that performance should overwhelm what's true about you, or the way you see the world, or the way your mind works. And so, yeah, I think we have to rethink the way we talk about 100E. I think we have to reframe the way that opportunity is understood. My ideal version of 100E sees itself as a place of resistant performance, of a bunch of folks who don't match the norm performance of college, finding each other and finding relationship. And again, having those conversations that make a difference in their education.
Man, I must say you're really giving me and the camera a lot to think about and to talk about, because what you're saying has a lot to do with, I would say, both of our college experiences. And it's just cool to hear a teacher say that and not just another student. You know? Well, I got one more question for you. It's the last one. If you could tell an oncoming student nowadays just some like words of advice, you know, what would you tell them and why?
Be careful how fast you buy into anything. And that includes what major you're going to be a part of, or whatever club you want to join, or whatever you envision for yourself. Because when you are at the age that you're at, the point is discovery. The point is finding things. And if you're not open to that experience, if you're not open to, you know, being halfway interested in something and showing up, then you're missing the opportunity. So yeah, take those opportunities, be interested, and be conflicted. Don't feel like you have to have every answer, because God, I didn't find my answers until I was 35. You have time. Just be gentle on yourself as you're making those decisions, and be honest.
Well, all right. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful interview. I'm Cole with MUFS, and once again, I'm here with
Jason McCormick.
And thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course.